Hello and welcome to another episode of Just Onside. It's usually there would be three, but it's getting quite tiring now. There's only two of us. I've got OS, the ever present, the ever reliable. How are you, OS? You okay?
I'm doing good, thank you. It's what is it? Tuesday evening.
It's Tuesday evening
Yeah, I'm doing
indeed.
well, thank you. Not too bad. Good start to the week, and looking forward to this episode. Slightly few different topics to discuss.
Excellent, excellent. And OS did mention different topics, and what we're going to talk about today is over the weekend there was a fantastic performance by England under 21s. Winning the European Championship after a long, long time. I'm not sure have we actually won the championship before, or is that the
Uh,
first time
I'm not sure, but it was the first time in a long time for England
in
in
a long, long
football.
time? Absolutely, yes. And what we decided to talk about was from the 21s, who do we think is going to be an exceptional star? Now, it is slightly unusual because I think the last time that we qualified or we were in the final was in 2009. And what I'll do always, I'm going to just go through the side from 2009, just to give context, because
Yeah.
it's sometimes very difficult to predict as to who's going to be a star because I'm going to name the 2009 side, and it will give you an idea that probably from that side, very few really became established stars. So in the starting 11 in 2009 was Scott Loach, keeper, Martin Craney, Mika Richards, Uzi, Nedum Unahu. I've absolutely butchered the name. Kieran Gibbs, Fabrice Muamba, Lee Catamol, Mark Noble, James Milner, which I find hard to believe. This was 2009. The man's 47. He must have been 30 at the time. Uh, and then Adam Johnson, the less said, the better. And Theo Walcott. That was the starting 11. So if you can, I mean, obviously when I go through the names, who's the standout in 2009 for you, always?
Just give me the names again quickly. Just run them off
Right.
because we know Mika Richards burst onto the scene famously. So,
He
but
did,
go on.
yes. So Scott Loach, Martin Craney, Mika Richards, Nedum Unaho, Manchester City player. I mean, I can't say his name, but he,
Nida Manoha. He's a he's a he's
yeah,
he's he's a
that's the one.
pundit. He's a pundit at times as
He
well.
is now somewhere. Kieran Gibbs, Fabrice Muamba, who obviously whose career
Hmm.
was curtailed with
Hmm.
the heart attack that he had. Lee Catamol, very
Hmm.
combative player. Mark Noble, stalwart for West Ham.
Hmm.
Jamie Milner, Adam Johnson, who, as I said, the less said got involved in some nonsense, and he served a very heavy price
Yeah.
for it, and
Yeah.
has not played since. I think since his release, he's not played since. And
Mhm.
Theo Walcott.
Yeah, but I think actually a fair few of those went on to have very good careers. I mean, James Milner, obviously would be one in terms of having played for a number of clubs, Leeds United, Newcastle, Villa, Man City, Liverpool, just to name a few. But he's gone on to obviously win trophies at the highest level. Mika Richards, obviously, as well, played a part in that title winning season for Manchester City. Lee Cattermole had a long career, I guess, for Sunderland.
Hmm.
You mentioned combative, probably the right word. Yes, Kieran Gibbs was left back for Arsenal for a number of years. So yeah, I think a fair few of those. Obviously, Adam Johnson was playing right wing. He used to play on the inside for Sunderland
Hmm.
for a number of years, and Theo Walcott as well, who's gone on to have a fairly long career. Obviously, probably still the single most famous event to happen to him is probably Ericsson taking him to the World Cup when he had, I think, kicked a ball for Arsenal,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
against Southampton.
Absolutely,
But
absolutely.
I think a fair few. Mark Noble, many years. Obviously now I think he's got the director of football gig
Yes.
at West Ham, and obviously many celebrations after their Europa Conference League. So yeah, there's a fair few who went on to have, I would say, good careers. What's your quick thoughts?
Exactly that. I think if you look at the names, it's solid. They've all had quite solid careers. I mean, in terms of the players, I mean, Theo Walcott, perhaps if he was to replay his football career again, maybe I suppose may do things slightly differently. But he was playing with injuries. He had tremendous potential. Never, I don't think, fulfilled his potential. I think Kieran Gibbs, excellent. I think he was a very, very good left back. But on the whole, it's like with Mark Noble, solid career. Never played for England. I think James Milner, excellent uh, servant to all the clubs that he played for. But in terms of perhaps stars or sort of players that absolutely lit up stadiums? I don't think so. I think they were all sort of quite a number of them had good lower league careers,
Mhm.
but it sort of I don't think any of them really would sort of classify themselves as players that have had outstanding, maybe world class careers, which is the reason why I want to pick on the 2021 side. I've got a feeling that maybe not just one or two, maybe there's about three or four potentially, if they fulfill the potential, will go on to be world class players, which is really what the subject is. I want to I want your thoughts if you will, Lewis, from the squad that play the under 21s for England. Who do you think is going to be sort of the real standout player? The unusual thing is we've already got, I think, a number who are established Premier League players, which is unusual. But who do you think from the players that played in the under 21 uh, tournament? Who do you think is going to be one to really look out for?
Well, I think you alluded to it there, you in terms of some of them being quite established at their respective Premier League clubs, or even some of them have had seasons on loan lower down the leagues. For example, you've got the captain um, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, in terms of having played his full season at Burnley. They're now obviously a Premier League club. He's come back to Manchester City, where that's his obviously parent club. But I think that, in a sense, explains a little why England have been successful. They've got players playing for their respective clubs at a very good level, if not at the
Mm,
top league, but in the second league, but also playing crucial, pivotal parts. I mean, in the end, if you look at many of these players who are on loan, again, Taylor Howard-Bellis being one of them, he's a player on Manchester City's books. They've obviously, you don't just come through um, unless you've got some talent. And obviously, he's gone on loan Burnley, where Vincent Company would have known him from the ranks as well. I think. Look, I think, just to answer your question, I think just before I do, you mentioned you posed the question as though, well, which player will be the standout? And the challenge sometimes is football now. There's so many riches on offer, and there's so much potential distraction and what have you. That's always the one caveat that I'm always a bit conscious of about players potentially getting distracted with obviously mega riches on offer. So it's, as much as talent might be there, it's also then all the other intangibles, the application, the commitment that you need, and you do sometimes can worry about players who are who have elite talent but don't quite make it because of again, off the field distractions. But I think, just setting that aside, I'm just going to go through a few of them who I think do deserve notable mention. I'm going to start with the goalkeeper. I think James Trafford is about to potentially sign for Burnley.
mm,
He's
yeah.
obviously on the books at Manchester City. There's some talk that he will sign for Burnley in for 19 million pounds. That's a significant sum of money.
Mm,
That would make him the third most expensive English goalkeeper. Only 16 goalkeepers worldwide have gone for a more expensive transfer fee than what he's about to go for to Burnley. It was funny listening to his interview after the final, talking about how he told his squad and compatriots that he would be saving a penalty that day, and boy oh boy did they need him in the 96th minute against Spain in the final. But obviously didn't concede a goal in the entire competition. They won obviously 2-0 three times in the group stages against Israel, Czech Republic, and Germany, winning against Portugal in a tight affair 1-0, beating Israel again in the semis 3-0, and then coming through Spain for 1-0, where in that second half they did have to weather some pressure. But he deserves a great mention. He's obviously a top keeper, spoke well after the game as well, I thought. The challenge, and I was looking at this question a little bit, are you from the perspective of which players could also break into the England senior team as well. I was kind of having a look at that. Of course, if he goes to Burnley, he'll be their number one goalkeeper. So it'll be interesting to see how he contends. Vincent Company wants his team to play a certain way, so no doubt he'll be asked to facilitate that style. But what are the chances of him in the immediate future, or in the near future, breaking into that England team? And it's hard, isn't it? You've got Jordan
mm.
Pickford, Aaron Ramsdale, Nick Pope. Nick Pope's in his 30s, but the other two are fairly young. Pickford, if Everton had got relegated, may well have ended up at a bigger team. So the question is, what are the chances of him breaking into that senior team? I think they are remote for now, but I think his goalkeepers can go on obviously a lot longer. But so I think it's the right step. You play for a Premier League club, you get minutes under your belt, and let's see how he fares. The player that I think, and there's a few others I'd like to go through, and then I'll more than happy to give you the floor. But the player that I think there's the biggest hype about would definitely be Levi Colwill at the back. It's really interesting. He had a fantastic season at Brighton on loan from Chelsea. It seems by all intents and purposes that he's going to remain at Chelsea. I think Brighton tried to make him their most expensive signing ever. Liverpool were also interested in sniffing around. I know a lot of Chelsea fans, notably your son, who's incredibly excited about his potential. And having followed him closely, at least for this past season at Brighton, and if you watch him, he has this, I mean, it's a cliche, but he really does look like he has everything. He's so calm, so composed. He reminds me, and it's interesting because he may well get a chance to play alongside him, but he does remind me of like a young Thiago Silva in the sense of he just spots danger. He's got this really instinctive way of intercepting the ball, knowing where to be, where the cutback's coming, where the pass is going to be made. He's strong, he's physical, he's happy to slide in. But again, I think he's just so poised. He can actually play steps out, playing through balls, through the midfield, setting off attacks. He really genuinely does have everything. I think he's 20 years of age. The question's going to be, and I think he will get it, will he get those minutes at Chelsea? And I do think if he gets those minutes at Chelsea, with Chelsea looking to have a bit of a recovery season next year, I really do think he's one, especially given the fact that England in the senior team are quite top heavy and have some question marks, at least in central defence. Harry Maguire, where's he going to be? John Stone's fine, but he's aging a little bit, obviously coming into midfield. But you think there's opportunities there at the back to break in. And I think he's one, if he has a really good season at Chelsea, putting 2 back-to-back years together, I think he has a very decent chance of going to the European Championships in Germany for the senior team with Gareth Southgate.
Do you think he's going to get lots of game time at Chelsea?
I have a feeling that just looking at the squad composition right now, I mean, look, they've got lots of players. I think, though, it's the one area where I just feel like Pochettino, given his history, he does, I mean, with Spurs as well, he brought a fair few young players through. Now, look, they've got to have the talent. Pochettino knows he's not necessarily got time to play around. And Chelsea is a very different animal to Spurs were, especially when he took over the reins at Spurs. So I think it's perhaps laden with high risk, but he's not a player just simply coming through the academy. He's a player who's got Premier League experience and now elite tournament experience with the under-21s. And I really do think he's got the skill set to make it work. I think Thiago Silva's maybe going to become the captain, and I think he'll still probably play as a contingent on his health. Just think that leaves one spot where, and yes, they've got other players. I know they have Badiashile and Trevor Chalobah and what have you. I just think he's got the opportunity. If Chelsea are keeping him in, there's no European football, so there's not as many games to rotate around. But he's one who has the skill set, I believe, especially the modern day footballer, to play for England at the highest level. I think if you look at this England team, especially in the senior team, a lot of it is quite exciting, very kind of, it's modern day football, isn't it? You keep the ball, possession football, very different to how England used to play. And I think it's just at the back where there have been some question marks, especially given that Harry Maguire has not been playing for his respective club team. So I think he's one, from a skill set perspective, has everything. Of course, what he needs now is experience, and experience at the highest level. I think he'll get that at Chelsea. I really do. I think he's going to get some games under Pochettino, and it'll be up to him to kind of earn that spot over the course of the season and then beyond. I've got a few other players, but I do just want to get your thoughts, because I imagine this is one player that you've also thought about quite high.
Absolutely, yes. You're absolutely right. My only concern is how much game time he will get. And this is perhaps now critical moments in the careers of some of these players.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, there are some players who are established, so it's fine. There are others that perhaps are just on the cusp, but they need now to be, if not regular, certainly getting lots of game time. And that's my concern, because I think he's good enough now to be starting. He's obviously proven it. Another player, I mean, I've got a very close friend, a Burnley friend, who was talking about harwood-bellis. And he was waxing lyrical about this player. He unfortunately got injured. I think halfway through the season he got injured. But by that stage, I think they'd run away with the league. So it really wasn't that important that he came back. But I asked the question today, actually. And I asked him, I said, well, where do you rate him in terms of championship defenders? He said it's the best. He was the best defender in the championship by quite a long margin. Uh, he seems to have everything that you need in a modern centre back. I think you're obviously talking about Colville at Chelsea. I think this guy as well, from reports that I've heard from fans who have obviously watched him. So George that I spoke to, he's obviously watched him, and he knows his football. So he's talking from a position where he obviously understands the game, and he absolutely believes that this guy has got all the attributes that you need to reach the very top. So I'm keeping an eye out for this guy. At the moment, I think this talk, I'm surprised that Burnley haven't put in a bid in, because I think I've heard that West Ham and Fulham
Fulham.
are very interested. I'm surprised because I think the price that they were talking about is 15 million. I
15
think
million.
yeah. So uh, it seems a steal. I mean, I'm surprised, especially now that obviously they've had the exposure in the under 21. So I'm surprised that clubs like Liverpool, because I think he would be a wonderful asset to Liverpool, and he would be, I think, somebody that he could probably turn around and say, well, yes, I will be the partner for Van Dijk, rather than just saying, well, I'll be part of the squad. So certainly, Harwood-Bellis is one to look out for. Anthony Gordon. I mean, he's got mixed reviews. I don't know whether it's because of his attitude, but he was certainly, I mean, he was by all accounts the player of the tournament. The jury for me is still out on Anthony Gordon, and I think that's more to do with his attitude. I'm just, I don't know. Maybe there's times where I think it stinks a little. He maybe perhaps there's nothing wrong with self-confidence, but I just sometimes sort of think that maybe perhaps it sort of borders on arrogance to a point where it's detrimental to his career. So again, it's interesting to see how he goes on. But there's so much quality. I mean, compared to the 2009 side, I'm looking at the players. Morgan Gibbs-White, massive fan. Harvey Elliott, again, I love the way that he plays. I think he's at the right club. Curtis Jones, I saw him maybe about 3 years ago. I thought he was an exceptionally talented young football player. Uh, he's been plagued with injuries, so perhaps that sort of curtailed his progress. But again, somebody that I think has got a fantastic future. But the one for me, the one that I think will progress to be a world-class player, because I've listened to interviews with this guy as well, and he comes across really well. He comes across as one of those guys that I think his primary focus is on becoming the best player that he can be, and that's Jacob Ramsey. He didn't play in the final; he was injured. But at Aston Villa, I think he was outstanding. He was absolutely outstanding. He again, he's one of these modern, complete midfield players. He's great on the ball. He's got an eye for goal. He's good defensively. He's got a decent range of passing. Stevie G was a massive fan, and there was a lot. I mean, I was listening to an interview with McGinn and Ramsey, and McGinn was pulling his leg, sort of saying that you were his son, Stevie G's. But it's only because obviously Stevie G is a world class midfield player, and he obviously has got an eye for potential world class midfield players. So for me, the man that I'm really excited to look for in terms of how his career progresses, Jacob Ramsey. And I think if he stays injury free, from the way that he comes across in interviews, he doesn't seem to be somebody who's going to be seduced by the bright lights and I suppose all the adulation that comes with being a Premier League footballer, especially a good one. I think he's got his feet firmly on the floor. As long as he sort of maintains that, I think he will be out of the group that played for England under 21. So I think he will be a world star. But there are at least 4 or 5 that I see in that group that I expect to be quality players, and I think players that I think should be or will be called world class.
I think that's a fantastic shout with Jacob Ramsey. He had a really good season for Aston Villa, even through the kind of turmoil of changing managers. He finished the season quite well under Emery. And he's one of those players that when you watch him, especially the way he breaks from deep, he's got a knack for getting goals as well. A lot of these players will play for teams over the next 12 months, 24 months. And if they're not already at elite clubs or top tier clubs, you feel like they may well find their way. Ramsey's one of them to keep an eye on. You could see him playing for, with all due respect, Aston, with a bigger club if he continues on the trajectory that you've you've outlined there perfectly. Just going back to Taylor Harwood-Bellis, you're absolutely right. I think if it wasn't for Levi Colwill in terms of the exposure that he's had at Brighton, he'd probably be getting a lot more rave reviews about it. When you watch, he's 6'2". He captained the under-17s team as well at international level. Now captaining obviously the under-21s to tournament glory. So there's clearly some leadership qualities there that the managers like in him. When you watch some of his highlights, and again, I won't be ignorant. I'll defer to you, obviously, Burnley supporting friend. But when you watch some of his highlights, he has a really good array of passing. He really does love the diagonal, kind of over to the left wing. But even on the other wing, he plays some really cute balls forward. So he likes to take risks. He's got a lovely range of passing, but he's solid as a defender as well. He's quick. Good interceptions, similar to Levi Colwill. And the question is, I mean, you wonder whether or not in kind of 5 years' time, whether that could be the centre-back pairing for kind of England. The chances are perhaps it won't be, but you just don't know if these players continue on the same trajectory. But, I mean, you mentioned Burnley, but I do think sometimes what happens is you have him for a year, you get promoted, and then some of the other slightly bigger, more established clubs, maybe like a West Ham and Fulham, come calling, and it's more difficult then to get involved in bidding wars when you're trying to really keep things maybe just ticking along. But yeah, I mean, interesting to see where he ends up. You think he moves on from Man City? Let's be honest, he needs to play. Whether they kind of leave him, put him out on loan again to a Premiership club, time will tell. But he does look like an absolute potential star. And again, just one to keep an eye on, because both centre backs are going to be playing in the Premier League next year, it would seem. It'll just be interesting to follow their fortunes, because I do think there are some opportunities to break in. A couple of players you mentioned there as well. Curtis Jones had a great end to the season with Liverpool, part of their resurgence at the back end when they threatened to steal Champions League spot. They obviously finished, I think, 5th in the end. Gaining a Europa League spot, but he finished the season really well for Liverpool. A lot of the talk last season for Liverpool was the midfield, and they've obviously strengthened in that area. We'll get onto that in the second segment, but Curtis Jones will get significant minutes, you feel, next year under Jurgen Klopp. There's obviously, it seems that Alexander Arnold, whether he'll be inverted from the right back position, will also be playing within that space. So there's competition there. But you do think, given his form at the back end of the season, plus his form for England, it seems like he's got an opportunity right now, and probably the right manager under Klopp as well, to be given a chance to stake, a place. And with Europa League, again, there'll be a lot of rotation, so he'll get a lot of opportunity. The only last player I'll probably quickly just mention, I think he goes a little under the radar because he's probably not yet established himself, especially for his club, is Cole Palmer. Now, he's another one where I think you spoke about it earlier, Ayub, that a lot of these players have decisions to make, and I would argue he probably has one of the more difficult ones. A lot of the others will find homes either at their parent clubs or they're about to move. Clearly, we've gone through Trafford. Colwell's probably going to be playing for his parent club. Harwood-Bellis will end up playing for a Premier League club and probably will be a starter based on the fact that he'll be going for a decent fee. Cole Palmer is obviously playing for Manchester City. Very difficult to break into that team, especially when the standards, but also the expectations are so high. They've just done the treble, so they'll be going for everything again next season. And the question is, will Guardiola be able to give him some minutes? I think he's only averaged about 35 minutes for his appearances so far, and he's not made that many of them. What position is he best at? That's not been fully kind of established. He can play on both wings. Now, the question is, if a Bernardo Silva moves on, does Pep, give him a few more minutes to give him a little bit more faith? But again, at Manchester City, it's really difficult. You saw with Phil Foden this season, he had a very stop-start season. Although he has broken through at Manchester City, obviously a lot more than Cole Palmer has. It's a club that where you have to hit the road running and you have to really keep your standards high, and even then there's going to be a fair level of rotation. You've got to earn the manager's trust, and he, I think, arguably has the biggest decision to make whether or not he moves on, because he could play for a lot of what I would say mid-table, lower Premier League place teams, and he would be a starter, definite starter. So it's just whether or not he's willing to make that decision. But yeah, you've covered some of them there. Again, the Jacob Ramsey one is a fantastic shout, but from an England perspective, I look at that back line, and I think some of those young centre-backs have a real chance. And even the Harwood-Bellis shout for Liverpool was a good one, because they are looking to have somebody to support kind of Konate and Van Dijk, because Matip may leave, definitely leave next year, but may well leave this summer. And the question is, could he establish himself? I think it might just be a little big, too big a step right now, let's say, at this juncture of his footballing age. But yeah, I think some of these players, I think, will go on to have fairly illustrious careers.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches at the moment. English football, it seems as healthy as ever, and I think this is it it's a reflection, I suppose, of the strength of the Premier League. That even at the junior level, obviously, it's sort of filtering down, which is what they always sort of say, that an ideal league is, if it's a strong league, it filters down with a strength sort of at the junior levels as well. So I certainly think we've got exciting times in terms of English football.
Just one more thing
Well,
on
go on.
you mentioned about Gordon. What are your thoughts? I mean, don't you think he's vulnerable, because Newcastle will have their own timeline, right? And he didn't obviously hit the road running when he was bought in from Everton for big money in January, and he had a very, I mean, Eddie Howe gave him some games at the back end of the season, so he was giving him every opportunity, and he did well at the Euros, and I think he was playing kind of false strike in some of the games and what have you. What are your thoughts? Because Newcastle clearly have somewhere to be, let's say. And he could be an early casualty if he doesn't have a good season next year. What are your thoughts? I mean, that's one where I think it's one to keep an eye on.
It's what I sort of alluded to before. I think ability wise, there's no question. I think he is a good player. I think the fact that obviously big clubs, oh, I say big clubs. I mean, obviously Newcastle went in for him. I think there was interest from Chelsea as well, if memory serves me right. So certainly he's created a reputation. I think the problem is it's what's between the ears. I think that is where I fear for Anthony Gordon. I think he just I don't know what it is. I mean, as I said, I mean I've not sort of come across too many interviews, so I'm not exactly sure what he's like when he sort of speaks. But I just sort of fear that somehow he either has a high opinion of himself to the point where it's detrimental. I don't know whether that's the case or not. So it's going to be interesting. You're right. Absolutely. This is a critical season. He's a good player, no question. Because you don't spend, was it 40 million that Newcastle paid for him?
45, yeah.
Yeah, 45 million. You're not going to pay 45 million for a player of that age if you don't think he's a good player. But I don't think he pulled up any trees when he was at Newcastle. So my concern just is that how is it going to pan out? Is he going to get his head down, or is this going to be again something that he gets carried away? That's the problem. He's obviously had an outstanding tournament. Does he go back to Newcastle? Sort of as I'm the main man. I'm somebody that obviously has got a proven track record. I've won a trophy, albeit under 21s, or is he going to sort of say, right, it's my opportunity now to establish myself as a frontline Newcastle player, and then let the rest take care of itself? So interesting. As I said, ability wise, not a problem. I think it's just the mentality. Has he got the right mentality to take himself to the next level?
Yeah, I agree. And with Newcastle also being interested in bringing in Harvey Barnes, that's going to make competition for places up front for Newcastle even more challenging. They've got Champions League football, so he'll get exposed to a higher level of football, which is good for his footballing development. But you're right, it's let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he left Everton under, let's say, trying circumstances. I think there was a little bit of to-in and fro-in with the fans, and I think Everton fans weren't too happy. But he's a young player, and he's got an opportunity next season to show what he's about.
We wait with bated breath. Interesting piece that, as I said, it was I think it would have been rude if we'd not obviously covered the under 21s, because it's not every year that we win a tournament. In fact, it's a very rare thing that English football wins a tournament. So I think rightly we give it the attention that it deserved. We've talked about players moving, which leads us on interestingly to, I suppose, transfers that have either happened or going to happen, or perhaps at the moment are rumours of potential moves. So in terms of what's happened, OS, in terms of signings or in terms of potential moves that you think are going to happen, what sort of grabbed your attention so far?
what I would say is it's not even just singular signings. It's more how certain clubs are behaving, and you think, okay, well, how does this fit in terms of incomings, in terms of outgoings? Where does this leave them? Does this leave them in a more beneficial position, in a more stronger position than last year? Or are there some clubs where you think, oh, right, this is one to keep an eye on. They've lost a couple of crucial players, and just a certain set of circumstances aligned where you think, are they going to have a difficult season? I'm going to start with a couple of interesting storylines, if I may, and then we'll move on to some others. And I want to get your thoughts. I think the one that's interesting for me, and you'll like this because I know it's one of your favorite clubs, let's say, but it's Brighton. And Brighton have lost, they've lost three really critical players, or they are going to lose three really critical players from last season. Alexis McAllister obviously has moved on to Liverpool for 35 million. They're going to lose Moses Caicedo, whether that's the Chelsea or another club. It looks like Chelsea are the front runners, and they obviously lost Levi Colwill back to Chelsea, and it looks like he's obviously going to remain at Chelsea. Those are three integral players from their kind of, I mean, they were everyone's kind of second favourite team, weren't they? I mean, for the most part, played some lovely football under De Zerbi. And I just wonder, I mean, they bought João Pedro from Watford, but I mean, James Milner, they bought a goalkeeper in from Anderlecht. The interesting one for me with Brighton is this is such a big season for Roberto De Zerbi because he got so many plaudits last year, and rightly so. But he's lost three crucial players, and they've also got Europa League to contend with next season. And I believe that he believes that he's destined for the top because he does have a good high opinion of himself, and rightly so. I do like his touchline demeanor. He's a bit feisty. He speaks well. I mean, look, I genuinely think that there are some big clubs that would be in for him if he could have another great season for Brighton. And I do think this will be his last year, by the way. And I think if he has a good season for Brighton this year, under the circumstances of losing arguably his three best players, arguably in Caicedo, Alexis McAllister, and Colwill, I think that will really kind of, alert some of the bigger clubs. And I think there may well even be some big Premier League openings potentially in the following season, which we'll come on to in future episodes. But I just find that storyline a little bit interesting, if I may, just because, again, they were integral to what Brighton did. Now, the main mantra about Brighton is they recruit incredibly well, and they keep that machine churning. But there's only so much in terms of talent that you can lose and just simply think, well, we'll just replace it. And I think this is another test for Brighton, another test for their kind of recruitment team. But that's one that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. And then again, just another quick one before I kind of give you the floor, before we cover some of the other teams. The other interesting one for me is Wolves, because I think they've had to balance the books because of obviously financial fair play considerations and what have you. They spent a fair bit last January to kind of stave off relegation. They managed to do that under Lopetegui, and credit to him because they looked like a team that was going nowhere fast, and they pretty much avoided relegation with something spare. But I think if you look at it right now, they've sold Collins to Brentford. Neves has obviously left for the Saudi Pro League. Martinho got released. And there've been a few other, at least what I would say is kind of not just bastions, but players who've played there for a number of years. So that does leave a little bit of a gap, especially when you know most likely we're going to be there hovering again. Obviously, Adama Traore is gone as well. You just wonder in terms of incomings as well. They've not had much in terms of activity. Now, they had a fairly decent squad. I say decent, but they had a lot of young players as well. I just wonder whether or not that could be a real challenge for them next year. Conor Cody, who was on loan at Everton's also gone to another club. So it's just a question about these are some of the kind of happenings where I look at where I say, oh, that club needs to be a little busier. They've lost a few key players. And I always think at the bottom, losing one player kind of means double, so to speak, because you don't have a plethora of quality options. It's one of the reasons why you're at the bottom. So losing one critical player could make all the difference. The only other club I would say from that perspective, that lens of saying challenges, would be Everton. But maybe you've got something to say about that. But Everton, I think, again, not much in terms of incomings. There's talk about Ashley Young signing on a freeze, 38 years of age. I mean, Sean Dyche rightly got some credit and plaudits, which he should do, and he deserves it. But they came close to getting relegated. Let's not get it twisted. They came within half an hour, 20 minutes. I don't think they want to do that again next year. So, again, I would worry for them because they got by the skin of their teeth, and they've not done much in terms of the summer. So that, again, looks a bit shaky. Now, most people will still fancy Luton and Sheffield United at least to get relegated, and time will tell. But Everton, another established Premier League club, where you think, are they going to learn the lessons over the last couple of years where their recruitment's been horrendous? So those are some of the more kind of interesting storylines to keep an eye on. We'll probably move on to the top of the table, let's say, in our second stanza. But what are your thoughts?
In terms of the bottom, you're absolutely right. There's not been that much. I mean, I suppose it's quite early days at the moment. But in terms of the bottom sides, it is so important that you get it right. I mean, obviously, as a Leeds fan, I know that if you get it wrong, it can be catastrophic in terms of the consequences. But I just want to talk about this. This is quite interesting. I was talking with somebody about this. I think last season was it was a much harder league in terms of the clubs that were in the Premier League. I think this season, Everton probably won't find it as difficult because I think there's already two places taken for relegation. That's Sheffield United and Luton. Luton, I am saying right now, will finish with the record low points. Everything will be a record, but in a negative sense. And have you noticed some of the players that they've bought? I think they've bought somebody from League One. I have a feeling people are thinking that no, I'm talking codswallop, but I've got a feeling that the owner is resigned to relegation this season. So what he doesn't want to do is spend a huge amount of money. He's almost planning on, right, we go down. Obviously, we've already got 150, 200 million for this season. We'll spend a minimal amount. We are going down, but when we go down, we'll obviously have the 150 million that we've saved. We'll obviously have a slight parachute payment as well. And then I think the intention is to develop the squad to then come back up, but with the possibility that, right, this time now we will stay up, because it's sometimes the problem with clubs that come up is that they put all the eggs in the basket and it doesn't quite work because it's a league without mercy. So I think Luton are resigned to going down. I think Sheffield United, I don't fear for them because I don't really care about them, but in the sense that I just don't think they've got what it takes. I think in terms of the players that have come up, very few players, if any, are Premier League standard, really, if I'm being honest. They need to have a significant investment. I don't think it'll happen. So I think they'll go down as well. So I think Everton are quite lucky in the sense that, right, there's only one spot. I think they're sniffing. There's been some talk over the last couple of weeks about Willie Gnonto, our player, Leeds player, going to Everton, which will be a brilliant signing. I'm not sure exactly what the fee has been sort of bandied about, but it's about 20 million, which I think is a steal.
Are you sure there wasn't? Are you sure there wasn't a decimal point in there?
How dare you? He's worth, I think, double that. I'll be honest with you. I think he will be worth double that. He's a guy with tremendous potential. He's shown glimpses, albeit it's sort of faded badly. But when you're playing for a side as poor as Leeds, it's contagious. If you're playing with Bamford, it's an impossible task. So I think Everton, if they make 2 or 3 signings, it could be okay. But it's it's absolutely critical to buy the right players. You talked about Brighton, and you rightly as well talked about the recruitment. They seem to be, I mean, it is science. Their recruitment is unbelievably good. And it will be tested. You're absolutely right. They're losing 3 players who were pivotal in their success last season. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how good De Zerbi is. In terms of recruitment, how are they going to recruit? Who are they going to recruit? And then how De Zerbi does? Because last season, I wouldn't sort of say he had a ready-made side, but he certainly had. I mean, Potter had done some good work, so he'd laid the foundation. So in a sense, it was quite, I wouldn't say easy, but it was certainly a club that if you're a decent manager, it's a good club to take over. This is going to be a real test. So at the moment, there seems to be, in terms of activity, even with Rice and Harry Kane, I would have thought that Rice would have been signed and sealed and delivered. Is it because he's on holiday? Is that the reason why there's a slight delay? Harry Kane, there's apparent talk. I mean, I don't know where this talk comes from. If it's from the Sun, it's nonsense. If it's not from the Sun, maybe there's some credibility. But apparently Bayern, he's accepted terms as to where these news stories come from. But I don't see him leaving the Premier League. He's too selfish. He wants the Premier League goal-scoring record. So, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously, it's not some. I mean, we've talked about Kane before, but what are your thoughts on Harry Kane? What do you think is going to happen? Will he stay?
I mean, I still believe that later on in this window, there will be a situation that will emerge that will see Harry Kane leave Spurs. Now, that's not. It's not a prediction per se. It's just the way I see certain things aligning. I mean, I do think. Do I think there's some truth to this Bayern Munich story? I don't know. It's difficult to tell, right? In terms of this kind of second bid going in, and obviously Spurs still rejecting. And it was a fairly kind of hefty bid and what have you. And again, if you depending on what you read, there's talk that Harry Kane wants to leave. To your point, I need to see that. I'm not so sure, but I still think there's some. I still think that Manchester United later on in this window, I think that storyline will develop. In my opinion, I really do think. I mean, they will 100% buy a striker. That's obvious. They obviously after the young striker from Atalanta. But I do think the Harry Kane story will develop in the back end. I mean, look, in the end, the question will be also if he does stay, does he sign a contract? Now, there was some talk today about him being offered £400,000 a week to sign a new contract. Again, it's difficult to know what to believe. I just think this season it's a bit of a crossroads. Do I think he could eke out one more season at Spurs and leave on a free? Yes, I could see that. I would be surprised. The most shocking outcome for me would be him staying and signing a contract. Not necessarily staying, but I think staying and signing a contract would be. I would be quite amazed. I would be dumbfounded if that happened. So I do still think this summer it's on, but let's see. You mentioned about Rice. I think some of that is just language around the contract piece and what have you. I think he's done all the medicals. I think that should be announced. I know we've been seeing it for quite some time, but I think Arsenal will announce it over the next couple of days. I think Timber's also pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered. Just in terms of some of the other players that I just want to cover, I'm just going to cover two quick players which I'm really interested to watch out for next season. Dominic Szoboszlai for Liverpool from Leipzig, 60 million kind of triggering his release clause. He had a fantastic relationship at Leipzig with Christopher Nkunku, who's obviously going to be playing for Chelsea next season. They had a great relationship. He's a footballer, I think, that will. I genuinely think he's going to make a strong impression next season for Liverpool. His best position is attacking midfield. I think he's got obviously Alexis McAllister with him as well. Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's going to be quite an attacking team for Liverpool. You feel in terms of the way they will play next season. So that should be very exciting for Liverpool fans. But if you watch his highlights, I mean, he's got a lovely right foot. Stylish, but takes all the set pieces. So they'll have a lot of set piece options with Trent Alexander-Arnold, but also Alexis McAllister, who's an incredible technician as well. So I think he's going to add a lot to their game. I think he should combine very well with that fluid forward line with Gakpo, Nunes, Jota, Diaz, Salah. I mean, I don't think Liverpool will be short of goals next season. He's got incredible long-range shooting. More than happy to have a dig from 30 yards. And you think if Liverpool are going to be quite a quick and fast-paced team, you'd think teams are going to sit in a little bit and sit. So there should be plenty of opportunity for shooting. And if you've got Arnold and Dominic Szoboszlai from like 30 yards out, 25 yards out, both incredible right-footed technicians, I anticipate a lot of long-range goals for them next year as well. So he's one I'm really fascinated to see. Sandro Tonali for Newcastle, I think that's a really good pickup for them. Obviously, Badge rates him obviously as highly as Declan Rice. I think he made his points clear, but he'll be another one that Newcastle, one of their biggest thing is energy in that middle park. Guimaraes, Longstaff, they obviously had Joe Linton and what have you. So it'll just be interesting just to see how he fits into all that. But of course, you've got to make strong signings. You're playing the Champions League. You've got to build a squad. I'm going to save my last player till the end for the one that I thought is arguably the most interesting, and I think he can uplift his team significantly. But what are your thoughts on some of those players and maybe some others that you've got your eye on as well?
I think the Liverpool have done some excellent work, and they've done it really, really early as well, which is, I don't know whether it's critical, but certainly it sort of helps with the players to bed in, get to know the other players as well. So in terms of signings, you're always looking at, right, do these players make this team better? Are there a significant improvement on what they had? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all, I mean, you didn't need to be a footballing expert to work out a serious weak link in Liverpool was always the middle of the park. I think what they've done is they've got significant improvements with McAllister. Obviously, his experience in the Premier League. obviously you talked about the Leipzig player, but the potential is there. You're obviously you've talked about what he can add. So I'm certainly looking forward uh, to Liverpool as to how they play with these new players. It will be. I'm absolutely certain in terms of. Do you know? I mean, I suppose we'll do a show later on in terms of who we think will win the league. I think I'm absolutely certain there's still probably going to be one or two more additions from Liverpool if they can get a quality centre back. And we talked about harwood-bellis. That would be to me a fantastic acquisition. And then they always talk about a spine, a solid spine. That's always a great starting block. And that to me would be absolutely perfect. And I think if they get a quality centre back, maybe one or two other players, Liverpool will be serious contenders next season. Uh, Man City obviously have already lost Gundogan, so I'm not sure who they're going to get as a replacement. But in terms of signings, the one that the, I'm still waiting for uh, the major stories. At the moment, in a sense, it's predictable. I think Rice going to the Arsenal was always talked about, so it's not a surprise. So I'm just waiting for it to really get started. Not really anything that absolutely sort of whets my appetite at this moment in terms of, all right, this is brilliant. Liverpool to me at the moment is ahead of the game. I think what they've done is uh, they've they've sort of got players in key positions which they needed, so they're certainly in a strong position. Uh, I think teams at the bottom need to get their act together because this is a league that you don't want to be taking too many chances. You don't want to be dragging your heels. I'm sort of intrigued to find out what happens at the bottom. But at the moment, uh, it's all sort of just developing, just brewing, just bubbling. So apart from Liverpool, I'm sort of just looking to see what happens next week and the next coming days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will cover Arsenal briefly because they've obviously made a few big signings or about to confirm a few more big signings. Just on Liverpool, though, you're absolutely right. If you speak to many Liverpool supporters, it was the midfield, right? There was
Mm.
a lot of talk about an aging midfield: Henderson, Fabinho, Thiago, all past the age of 30 and often unavailable, especially in Thiago's case. Fabinho obviously dropped off in form, finished the season okay. Henderson obviously has played had a long career at Liverpool. One forgets, and probably now needs to be kind of ushered into that kind of squad player position, which is fine. They've got Europa League football, so there'll be plenty of games to go around. So I think when you look at the two big signings in the middle of the park, um, Dominic Szoboszlai, captain of Hungary as well, in terms of his national team, but he's 22 years of age. McAllister, 24, turns 25 in December. So they've got legs now. They've got youth. They've got energy. They'll be moving Arnold into midfield or as an inverted right back into midfield. So energy should not be the issue in terms of next season, especially covering some of those areas and some of those gaps. And that's one of the main issues that they had. I mean, harwood-bellis, you make a good point about Liverpool, but I don't see Manchester City selling to Liverpool. I think they respect Liverpool's potential challenge way too highly and their pedigree to sell to a direct rival. They don't mind selling to Arsenal though. But no, look, Arsenal have obviously been quite serious about their business as well. Kai Havertz, big money signing from Chelsea, Declan Rice about to be confirmed, and Julian Timber, who can play right back, right centre back, superb player for Ajax as well. So they've done some big business. There's talk that they may still be interested in Lavia from Southampton.
Good player, very,
Good.
very good young player.
Absolutely, Manchester City would get a portion of that sell-on fee as well. But yeah, there's some talk that he's interested. Liverpool might be interested in him as well. So there's a few clubs circling around him as well. I think the one player that I would like to just feature, and I just want to get your thoughts because it's probably the next domino to drop in some extent. We covered this briefly in our last podcast. Is the Manchester United impending signing of Andre Onana, the goalkeeper? And the reason I'd like to cover him just briefly is because I think he's such a big contrast from David De Gea that it's clear in a sense. I mean, you can clearly see where the progress is going to be from a football perspective. Now, time will tell. He has to prove. David De Gea was in the Premier League, a mainstay of the Premier League for 12 years. The time will tell if Onana, who's currently 27, will be able to forge a long career at Manchester United. But we understand why they are getting him, right? I mean, it's going to be about 40, 43, 45 million from Inter Milan. He's such a fundamentally different player to David De Gea. David De Gea, great shot stopper. We know the cliche. He's a great shot stopper. He's good with saves, but a little bit kind of lacking confidence and a bit kind of I won't say weak, but a bit skittish in possession with regards to being able to play on the floor. And Eric Ten Hag wants to play with control. He wants to start attacks from deep. If you look at a lot of the major teams in the Premier League, they have goalkeepers who can play with their feet. Ramsdale, Ederson, Alisson, just to name a few. You even saw at Spurs at times Lloris struggle because he's not as, let's say, comfortable into the passing around at the back. And on, I just want to give you a few kind of statistics. Last year, 224 short passes he attempted. He completed all of them. 98% of his medium range passes were also completed. He makes 55% of his long range passes compared to De Gea. That's 40. De Gea completes 44% of his long range passes. And his overall pass completion on honors is about 81, 82%. De Gea's is 71%. So, I mean, from a passing perspective, Onana's streets ahead. And I think it's not just passes, statistics for the sake of statistics. What it does is it exudes calm. The other players tend to make greater angles because they know he can find us. He plays with a certain confidence. There's many times for Inter Milan, you'd see him advance into arguably the defensive midfield position with the two centre-backs fully out wide. And what it means is that the opposition can't take liberties. Whereas with De Gea, they might be, oh, let's chase this down. We might get something off it. Or we can put him in positions of difficulty by applying semi-pressure or hard pressure. With Onana, there's going to be you do that at your peril. He created he played 24 league games last year in the Serie A. He created 8 shot creating opportunities, basically, which means there's 2 actions. After his one, there's 2 actions that lead to a shot for his own team. So in 24 games in Serie A, 8 shot creations he created. De Gea in 38 games created 5. So it just goes to show that, well, if teams want to press him, and this Guardiola spoke about this before the Champions League final, that if people want to press, if teams want to press, he's more than comfortable. I gave you the statistics in terms of that medium range, long range passing. Now at Inter Milan, he's got Lukaku, Martinez, Zeko, all very comfortable and competent in terms of taking that ball in. And you could argue, well, at United, there's still some work to be done there in terms of as an established number 9. But I think he takes their game forward so much. Now, famously, and I just have to tell you the story. If you remember, he plays for Cameroon. He's obviously Cameroonian. And Rigobert Song, who was his coach at the World Cup, famously dropped him and sent him home after the first game, talking about how he takes way too many risks. Now, the question is, so he was saying to the press that, well, I keep telling him not to pass to the middle, pass to the sides, keep it safe. And he played the first game and then he was dropped and then he left the World Cup and he duly retired. And yeah, you might say, well, he shouldn't be doing that at Cameroon because maybe the quality of football isn't the same. And I agree, you have to do it in the construct of the team. And
he's got to listen to his coach. That's not a good sign, is it?
No, but this is, but from a football, so I'll come on to that. But from a footballing perspective, I think for United in terms of where they want to be, he's the perfect signing. You need someone who's got confidence, who's got a bit of personality about them. Yes, he'll make the odd mistake. Who doesn't? But I think he can bring more pros than cons. And yes, I mentioned that he was sent back from the World Cup. He's had a few run-ins. Obviously, at Ajax, he spent 4.5 years there kind of working with Eric Ten Hag during his reign. So it's a player who he knows well in terms of his strengths and weaknesses. You remember famously he served a 9-month ban for performance-enhancing drugs as well. Accidentally, when looking for an aspirin, he took a performance-enhancing drug.
So he claims.
So he claims. But anyway, it was a 12-month ban, but it was reduced to 9 months. But even thereafter, when he came back, that's when he went a little bit sideways for him at Ajax. It was difficult for him in terms of fitness levels and all the rest of it. But Eric Ten Hag then, they had a little bit of a falling out. Anyway, he moves on to Inter Milan. But the point is, I think he takes their game forward. And I agree, look, the basics of goalkeeping is to make as many saves as possible. But I think coaches now are all about what can you do for me in possession. So it's a bit like you've got this flip reverse thing where you're looking at strikers, you're thinking firstly, who can press from the front? I want my strikers to defend. So who can work their socks off and press and win the ball back for us? And you now want your goalkeepers. It's like the opposite way. You say, right, can you start attacks for me from the back? So it's kind of this kind of inverted mindset now in modern day football. But I think he's a really big pickup for Manchester United. And I do think at this stage of his career, he's an upgrade on De Gea in terms of where they want to be. And I like my goalkeepers with a bit of personality and with a bit of confidence, borderline arrogance. So I think he'll be one that the United fans will take to their heart.
And I think the key is he's already worked under Ten Hag. So if Ten Hag wants him again, it obviously means that he's very impressed with what he's already seen. So I think that's a good sign. And I think it will happen. It's happening, isn't it? Really, I mean, it seems to be something which is it's not a secret anymore. So it should be happening. So all good, all good. And on that note, I think we should call it a day. It's nearly 7 o'clock. All right. So as always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you as well for watching the show. And we'd love your opinions on, especially on the under-21s. Who do you think is going to be a standout player, as we discussed? I mean, a lot of them are already established, but who do you think perhaps will go on to the next level? So please make a comment, put in a comment, and as usual, please share with your friends, smash a like, subscribe if you haven't done so. And it really does help. I mean, what we're obviously trying to do is put together a show that is obviously appealing to the audience. Obviously, so the more people that like, view, it's all about algorithms. So hopefully, if it's something that you've enjoyed, please smash a like. It really would help the channel enormously. Okay, so on that note, and until the next time. What's the outro that I always get wrong with?
Well, you always say stay on side, which I understand, but bearing in mind we're just on side, I think we should use badges. Don't stray offline.
I'll let you do it. So, what should we not do, Otis?
Don't stray off.
Absolutely.